Are you ready to get into the Word? Turning your Bibles to Genesis chapter 27. Now, for the past few times that I've had the opportunity to minister, I've been doing what I would call a mini-series called What to Do When Your Life is in a Mess. We covered part 1 and part 2, and I know that you probably think, well, David, you're going to cover part 3 today. We're going to hit the pause button on that because my dad's been talking about some other things here lately, and just this past week, as I was just studying and preparing, I really felt led to go this direction. So if you would, turn in your Bibles to Genesis chapter 27. We're going to start in Genesis chapter 7, and what we're going to do is jump right into the middle of a story. We're going to jump right into the middle of a story of Jacob and Esau. A lot has transpired up to this moment. A lot is about to transpire after this moment, but we're going to jump into the middle of this, and what we're going to find is that Jacob has just stolen the blessing from Esau. Have you ever had any family issues? Anybody here ever had any family issues? Anything like that? I know last week I covered one of my family issues that I grew up with, and it was this picture right here. That is a huge family issue because I did not want to take that picture. There was so much drama. There was so much, I fought that. I did not want to take that picture. And it hurt. It left a wound on the inside of me for years. Even now, it's like pulling the scab off. It hurts because I was forced into something I didn't necessarily want to have to do. Have you ever had any family drama? Anybody ever had any family issues within your family? You can take that picture off now. We're done with it. Maybe you had some family drama this past week. Maybe you saw some at Thanksgiving. Maybe things didn't go the way that you hoped that they would at Thanksgiving. Maybe an issue was raised, maybe something was brought up from the past or something that you're dealing with in the present, or maybe even something off in the future. And it left some family drama. Maybe yesterday caused some family drama in your life. Maybe you enjoyed the football games and maybe the games didn't go your way. And as a result of it, you were left with some family drama. By the way, congratulations to all those teams that won yesterday. They played a great game. Or maybe you've got something coming up at Christmas. You know that you're going to have to be around somebody. You're going to have to be around family. And as a result of it, maybe you're a little bit hesitant about it. Maybe you don't necessarily want to go. Maybe you're not excited about Christmas because you know that you're going to have to see someone from the past that knows your past that maybe you still have a falling out with. Ever had any family issues? Whatever family issues you've probably had, I would dare to say they probably don't match what we're about to read, what we're about to see. Because in Genesis chapter 27, look at verse 35. And he, meaning Isaac, said, "Thy brother came with subtlety." In other words, he came with trickery, "and hath taken away thy blessing." And he said, and this is Esau, and Esau said, "Is not he rightly named Jacob?" Meaning, do you accurately name your son Jacob? Because Jacob means heel. Jacob means trickster. And he said, did not you and mom rightly name Jacob and give him the name that is fitting in this moment? He goes on to say, "For he hath supplanted me," or tricked me, "these 2 times. And he took away my birthright, and behold, now he hath taken away my blessing." And he said, "Hast thou not reserved a blessing for me?" And Isaac answered and said unto Esau, "Behold, I have made him thy lord, and all his brethren have I given to him for servants, and with corn and wine have I sustained him. And what shall I do now unto thee, my son?" Probably at that moment, Esau was probably thinking, a no would have sufficed. You didn't have to go into all that. You didn't have to tell me everything that you gave Jacob that was rightly mine. And he goes on to say, "And Esau said unto his father, Hast thou but one blessing, my father? Bless me, even me also, O my father." And Esau lifted up his voice, and he wept. And Isaac his father answered and said unto him, "Behold, thy dwelling shall be the fatness of the earth, and of the dew of heaven from above. And by thy sword shalt thou live, and thou shalt serve thy brother. And it shall come to pass when thou shalt have the dominion, that thou shalt break his yoke from off thy neck." And Esau hated Jacob his brother because of the blessing wherewith his father blessed him. And Esau said in his heart, "The days of mourning for my father are at hand. Then I'm going to kill that boy. I'm going to slay my brother." Back in verse 36, I want you to take notice of two words. It says that he took his birthright and he took his blessing. Birthright and blessing. Now, some people may actually think that those are the same thing, but they're not. The birthright and the blessing are two different things. The birthright is all the natural stuff. It's all the livestock. It's all the possessions. It's all the furniture. It's all the money. It's all the inheritance. That's the birthright. The birthright is the natural stuff. And so when you were a part of a family, when mom or dad got ready to pass away, they would call all the children in. And the father would begin to hand out the birthright. He would begin to hand out the blessing. And regardless of the amount of children that there were, the father would always give the oldest son, a greater percentage of the birthright. And it was done on purpose. There were many reasons for doing this, but there were primarily two reasons. The first reason is so that the family name would remain strong throughout the earth. So that the family name would remain strong throughout the earth. Because that's how they waged wars in those days for the most part. You get into a squabble with somebody, you get into a conflict with somebody, they didn't have law enforcement back then. They're not calling the deputy sheriffs, they're not calling the FBI, they're handling it among the families. And so these families, if you had power, if you had money, if you had great possessions, if you had power, then you had protection. But if you were without power, if your family wasn't as powerful as others, if you went up against someone like the Webbs or the Campbells or the Masseys or the Childers, when you took those families on, you were taking on everybody within that family. And if you didn't have that power and protection, then the hands of those kind of families that did have it, you could suffer all kind of abuse from it. The second reason was so that the family would remain strong throughout the earth. Not just the family name, but that the family would remain strong throughout the earth. And the reason that the elder was given more than all the other children were, even though they got some, was so that if one of them got in trouble, they could go to the patriarch, they could go to the matriarch, the woman or the man, and that person could help bail them out in that moment. If they got themselves in financial difficulty, if they got themselves into, if they had a falling out, if they lost everything, they could go back to the eldest, the one who had the most, and he could intercede and step in and intervene and help them get reestablished. That's the birthright. The blessing is the spiritual stuff. And at that time, what would happen is the father would call in the oldest, and he would lay his hands upon this eldest child, and he would speak words over him that he would not speak over the others. Now, he would speak words over the other remaining siblings, but he would not speak the same words as he did over the eldest, because it was reserved, that blessing, that firstborn blessing was reserved for the eldest. This empowerment, this spiritual empowerment of the blessing, they understood and they came to see that it could change things in the natural. And this is why the blessing was more important than the birthright. So Isaac and Rebekah, the father and the mother, they're married. They have Jacob and Esau, and they're twins. But yet they couldn't be more different. Esau, when he was born hairy. As he grew up, they said he was cunning in the field. He was this hunter. He woke up in the morning and man, he had to get out in the woods because there was something out there, an animal out there that had his name on it that needed to be killed. He probably had the lumberjack mentality or the lumberjack look, the beard and everything. I doubt he washed or bathed very much, but if he did, he probably was the one who used the Duke Cannon soap. He probably smelled so bad that when he got around people, he was the one who used the Old Spice. He enjoyed being out in the woods. And because of this, Isaac, his father, had a natural affinity for Esau. He understood Esau. He understood his temperament. He understood his personality. When he saw Esau, he saw himself. You ever done that with your children? You looked at your children and you see yourself in them. They do something in their temperament, in their actions, maybe some quirk, and you see yourself in them. You would be amazed at the number of people who came up to either Trent or me after that picture flashed a couple of weeks ago and said, you look just like Trent. Trent, you look just like your dad. You see yourself in them. And that's why Isaac had this natural affinity for Esau. Esau, he was also very hairy. Very hairy. Esau was so hairy, actually that sounds like a bad joke. How hairy was Esau? Esau was so hairy that one time Jacob, in order to convince his father that he was Esau, he went and slaughtered 2 animals, took this fur, this animal skin of fur, put it on his neck and put it on his hands in order to deceive Esau and Isaac. So whenever you think Esau from here on out, just think Chewbacca. Okay? Just think Chewbacca. But Jacob was totally different. Jacob didn't want to be out in the woods. The Bible said he was a plain man. I don't know if that means plainsman, as in someone because he had a lot to do with agriculture. He had a lot to do with livestock. He was somebody who enjoyed being home. He was a homebody. He enjoyed being in the kitchen. He enjoyed cooking, as we're about here to see. He enjoyed being at home. And because of it, Rebekah, his mom, had a natural affinity and love for Jacob. And so Isaac and Rebekah's favoritism among these boys ended up causing strife between these boys. Because there was this favoritism among both of them, it ended up turning these boys against one another. Because at some point during his childhood, Jacob said to himself, he said, you know what? I'm the youngest. I know that I'm the youngest. And I know that the birthright belongs to Esau. But you know what? I want that birthright. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to find some way to get that birthright. And so one day, he's been in the kitchen, he's been cooking. Esau, he goes out there on a hunt, maybe some type of expedition. He's out there, with his friends. Maybe he's leading them on some safari hunt or something like that. Or maybe he's just out in the woods doing his thing. Anyway, he comes home, and he comes home in a way, he must have been gone for days. He comes in, and he is famished. He is hungry. So he comes into the house, and he steps in, and all of a sudden, he smells this pottage, this soup, this beans and lentils. If you do some of the history about it, some of the study about it, that's what it indicates, this bean lentil soup. He smells it. Have you ever walked into a room and you smell something and you get hungrier than you were before? Maybe that happened to you on Thanksgiving. You ate something that morning so that you wouldn't have to set the scales back 10 pounds that night so that you could wake up feeling good on Friday morning. And so maybe you go in, you eat something a little bit, and you think, I'm not going to eat so much today. But as soon as you walk into that room, you smell everything that Tara or my mom or Erica has cooked, and all of a sudden, you were hungrier than you were just 15 seconds ago. And so Esau walks into the room, and he smells this pottage, this soup that Jacob has made. And so Jacob, remember, he wants this birthright. And so Esau comes up to him and says, hey, man, I am starving. Can you please give me some soup? And Jacob says, well, I won't give it to you, but I'll sell it to you. And Esau says, what? He says, yeah, I won't give it to you, but I'll sell it to you. And he says, okay, well, what for? And he says, for your birthright. And Esau, he sits there and says, no, I'm not going to sell you my birthright. He said, just give me some soup, man. He said, just give me some soup. I'm about to die. Have you ever exaggerated how hungry you were? I mean, here you are, you're hungry, you're hangry, your stomach is larger than the world. You exaggerate how hungry you are. And that's what he did. He said, I'm about to die. And he says, I'm not going to give it to you, but I'll sell it to you for your birthright. So what does Esau do? Unfortunately, Esau makes a decision that all of us have made. he trades the future for the present. He traded the future for the present. And all of us have done that. That birthright, which represents possibly millions of dollars in the future, he trades that away. He trades that future away for a bowl of soup. Because in his mind, he's thinking, what good is the birthright to me right now? My father is still alive. He's still kicking. I don't know how many more years he's got left. There's so much things that can transpire between now and then. My dad's still alive. What good is this birthright going to do me right now? But yet what he doesn't think about is that in the future, he is handing over millions of dollars and tons of resources. Did you know that the Bible adamantly says something about this? Turn over to Hebrews chapter 12. Hebrews chapter 12, verse 16. I'm going to read it to you out of the King James Version. And then here in a second, they're going to put up the message. But it says this, Hebrews chapter 12, verse 16 says, lest there be any fornicator or profane person as Esau, who for one morsel of meat sold his birthright. For you know how that afterward, when he would have inherited the blessing, he was rejected. For he found no place of repentance, though he sought it carefully with tears. Can you put up the Message translation? Can't read that back there, so I'll read it up here. It says, work at getting along with each other and with God. Otherwise, you'll never get so much as a glimpse of God. Make sure no one gets left out of God's generosity. Keep a sharp eye out for weeds of bitter discontent. A thistle or two gone to seed can ruin a whole garden in no time. Watch out for the Esau syndrome, trading away God's lifelong gift in order to satisfy a short-term appetite. You well know how Esau later regretted that impulsive act and wanted God's blessing, but by then it was too late, tears or no tears. Esau spent years weeping over his decision. His desire in the present cost him his future. Now, on this side of the story, we sit here, we laugh. We sit there and think, there's no way I would do something like this. I mean, after all, Esau, seriously, why not just go to the kitchen yourself, open the refrigerator, take out a loaf of bread, get some cheese, put some bologna on it, spread some mustard on it, and just make a bologna and cheese sandwich. It's easy to sit here on this side of it and say that, but really, we can't judge Esau too harshly. Because we all know of people who have made the same unwise decision in their life. Just either look at yourself or maybe look at us. Look at people that you know that are doing things that have no benefit in their future. If you don't believe me, just pull out your phone. Pull out your phone. Maybe you got the same notification that I got today. It pops up, screen time for this week up 13%. All you've got to do is just look at where that battery has been draining on your phone to understand what you're doing with things, whether it's relevant or irrelevant, and what it can do to your future. Esau didn't understand this. Esau didn't know this. The most successful people that I know give up something now, or willing to give up something now so that they can have something in the future. The wisest people that I know are the ones who trade the present for their future. Because the fact of the matter is that you can either pay now or play later, or play now and pay later, but either way you have to pay. Whichever way you go, there will come a moment where you have to pay. Now, we harp on Esau concerning this decision that he spent years weeping on, that the Bible admonishes us, don't allow some short-term appetite cost you your future. But how many of you know that Jacob is being a horrible brother? Horrible. That is terrible brotherhood. I mean, give the man some soup. Or at worst, trade some Xbox time. Don't take the man's birthright. But at the end of the day, only Esau can blame himself. Esau gave his birthright away, but Jacob stole his blessing. Esau gave it away, but then Jacob usurps. Here in just a minute, we're going to see the blessing away from Esau. Jacob, one morning, he gets up. Isaac has called Esau in, and they must all be in the family room because Isaac tells Esau, he says, hey, I want you to go out into the field. I want you to kill something. He said, my time is coming to an end. Isaac was dim. He says his eyes were dim. It indicates to me that he was probably blind, so he couldn't necessarily see his family, couldn't see his surroundings. He said, go out, kill something, and bring it back to me because my time is coming to an end, and I want to give you the firstborn blessing. Rebekah obviously hears this, and so she gets Jacob and says, hey, your dad, he may be about to die. He may be in his final moments. He has just sent Esau out to go kill something, bring it back, prepare it for him, and then he's about to bless him. He said, I want you to do this. He said, I know you've got the birthright, but I want to get you that blessing. I want to get you that blessing. He said, go out, kill something that has some fur on it. Come back in. We're going to put some fur on your neck. We're going to put it on your hands. Any other body parts that are exposed, we're going to put that fur there. Then I'm going to cook you your dad's favorite soup or favorite meal, and you're going to take it in there to him and convince him that you are Esau. Well, it goes down just like that. She comes up with this elaborate scheme. She does all this. Jacob takes that food into him and convinces his dad that he is Esau. He goes in and Isaac says, who are you? Well, I'm Esau. I'm your eldest son. He said, you sound like the voice of Jacob. Come here. He feels his hand. He said, but your hands are the hands of Esau. A moment later, he brings him in, and he must smell the Old Spice or the Duke Cannon on his raiments because he says, these clothes smell like Esau. And then Isaac proceeds to give Esau what he assumes Esau, which is really Jacob. He pronounces and begins to pronounce the firstborn blessing or the blessing over Esau, who is really Jacob. You know, what you speak over your children matters. What you speak over your children, it matters. Now, it may not seem like a big deal to you about having some words spoken over you. Well, you know, we don't do that in today's time. We don't do that like they did back then. What you've got to remember is, and maybe we should do that more. Maybe we should do that. Seek those blessings from our parents. Those things that they would speak over us. I recognize that it may not be a part of the way that we do things, but maybe it once again should be. Especially for parents who have a relationship with God. To speak those words in their final moments or in their final days about the blessing of God upon their life. Because you have to remember that we're in Genesis chapter 27. Jacob and Esau are 26 chapters removed from Genesis chapter 1. What does Genesis chapter 1 tell us? Genesis chapter 1 tells us that the natural stuff came from the spiritual stuff. That as a matter of fact, you could lose all the natural stuff. You could have a world that was filled with darkness. You could have a world that was void. But if you had some spiritual stuff hovering over the natural stuff, then you could create natural stuff out of that spiritual stuff. And so it is with you and I today. You may have lost some natural things. You may have a life that is filled with darkness. You may have some void in your life. But if you've got some spiritual things hovering in your life, if you've got this Word of God at your feet, in your lap, hovering above you, then guess what? Those natural things must line up. Those natural things have to come into line with the Word of God. You can create some natural things out of the spiritual things. Jacob knew that. Jacob knew that. That's why he wanted it. That's why his mom designed this elaborate hoax to get it for him. He goes in there and he gets it. Esau comes back from his hunt, prepares the meal, walks into his dad and says, hey, Dad, I've got your meal here. And he says, who are you? He says, I'm Esau. And then it dawns on both him and Isaac what has happened. And that is that Jacob has stolen the blessing. Jacob has stolen the blessing. But Esau, in that moment, he recognizes what has been done. I'm sure he's dealing with a lot of feelings. I'm sure he's dealing with a lot of bitterness and resentment. But those words meant so much to him. I'm sure that maybe he saw his granddaddy, Abraham, pronounce some things over Isaac. Those words still meant so much to him that he insisted that his dad speak something over him. And in that moment, look again at verse 40, what Isaac said to him. And he said, and by thy sword shalt thou live, meaning that you're going to be a man of war. And he said, and thou shalt serve thy brother. And it shall come to pass, when thou shalt have the dominion, that thou shalt break his yoke from off thy neck. In other words, he is saying, Isaac is prophesying to Esau that there will come a time where you will grow and you will break loose from the yoke that Jacob has put upon your neck. From what? The wound, the hurt, the offense that Jacob has caused in his life. Isaac is prophesying that when Esau gets dominion over what Jacob has done with him, then and only then will he really live free. Then and only then will he be free. What is a yoke? It's not the center of an egg, that's a yolk. A yoke is a device that controls an animal. But even beyond that, a yoke is something that you can control that animal with, but it also is something that you can attach something to it in order for that beast, that animal to pull something with it. You could attach a plow to it. You could attach a wagon to it. You could attach a chariot to it. It was also something that could be used to pull things around. And that's what Isaac is telling Esau. He's saying, you're going to pull around all this hurt, all this offense, all these wounds until you get dominion over that, and then and only then are you going to live free. I'm sure Esau is thankful for the words, but in that moment, another inside emotion takes place to the point where now he wants to kill Jacob. He wants to kill his brother. Have you ever been there? Somebody does something to you and your first innate reaction is, I'm going to kill that guy. Maybe not. Maybe in your heart you know that that's not what you really mean. What you really mean is I'm going to make that guy pay for what he did. But to Esau, he meant it. The only thing that kept Esau from doing that was that he knew his dad was in his dying moments, was in his final days. That's what he believed, that he was in his final days, and he did not want Isaac's last memories to be of him and Jacob fighting. He said, after this period of mourning, after these days are fulfilled, then I'm going to kill Jacob. Rebekah heard this. Rebekah heard that Esau planned on killing Jacob. So she calls Jacob in and says, hey, this is what I want you to do. I want you to get all your stuff together. He said, I want you to go over to my brother's place over in a distant land, your uncle Laban, and I want you to go over there and we're going to tell your dad that because I don't like these Canaanite or Hittite women, that I'm going to send you over there so that you can find a wife. And so they go into Isaac and say, he's leaving, he's going to Uncle Laban's house so that he can find a wife because I don't like these Canaanites, I don't like these Hittites women. And that makes Esau even furious. So this morning, I want to talk to you about taking the yoke off your neck. I want to talk to you about letting it go. Who's hurt you? Who are you mad at? Who are you offended by? Who do you need to forgive? Forgiveness is hard. If it's not hard, then you haven't been hurt. Then you haven't been hurt bad enough. Forgiveness is hard. But this morning I want to give you 4 reasons why you need to forgive in order so that you can take the yoke from off your neck. Number 1, If you don't, you'll sow bad seed. Galatians chapter 6, verse 7 says this. Be not deceived. Everybody say, be not deceived. Be not deceived. God is not mocked, for whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. The key word to this verse is the word whatsoever. Whatsoever. The Phillips translation actually says, your harvest in life depends entirely upon what you sow. Your harvest in life depends entirely upon what you sow. You sow judgment, guess what you're setting yourself up for? Judgment. You sow trickery, guess what you're setting yourself up for? Trickery. You sow hurt, guess what you're setting yourself up for? Hurt. Be not deceived, God is not mocked, for whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. What's the first thing you want to do when you've been hurt? When you've been hurt, once again, your natural reaction is to look for a way to hurt that person equal to or greater than they hurt you. And so in Esau's mind, he's sitting here thinking, Jacob is getting away with this. Not only has he hurt me, but he's got this lifestyle that if he continues to live this way, he's going to hurt a lot of people. So therefore, it's my job, it's my responsibility to teach him a lesson. I'm going to make him pay. Maybe I've backed off the decision to kill him, but I'm going to make sure that he suffers for what he did to me and taking my birthright and taking my blessing. And all the time, God is saying there, sitting there, up in heaven saying, Esau, don't do it. Be not deceived. God is not mocked, for whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. But God, you don't understand what he did. He took my blessing. He stole my birthright. God is saying, be not deceived. I am not mocked. Whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. God is telling him, no, Esau, you do not have to get him back. Because what happens in your life has nothing to do with the seed that Jacob has sowed, but it has everything to do with the seed that you are about to sow. And here's Jacob. He's thinking that he's gotten away with it. He's sitting here, he's in another land, he's got the birthright, he's got the blessing, he's been sent over here to find a wife, hashtag blessing, hashtag good life. He's thinking all these things, I've got it made. But what happens? What happens? Be not deceived. God is not mocked. Whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. What happens to Jacob? The trickster gets tricked. What seeds did he sow to his father? Trickery. By tricking his dad into believing that he was his brother. What happened to Jacob? He got tricked. How? Maybe you remember the story. Joseph is one of 12 brothers. 10 of them were out in the field, including Joseph. 11 of them were out in the field, including Joseph. And Joseph is the son that Jacob loves. He has a natural affinity, loves him above the other ones. I don't promote favoritism. I'm just saying that Jacob had this favoritism towards Joseph. So much so that he bought him and made him a coat of many colors. And the kids know this. The other brothers know this. They're jealous of him. They're envious of him. And so one day they're out there in the field and they say, let's do something about Joseph. He's saying that we're going to rise up or he's going to rise up. We're all going to bow down to him. We've had enough of this. We don't like him. Let's do something about it. So what do? They throw him in a hole and they sell him into slavery, but they take that jacket off and then they take it back to Jacob, his father, and they say, oh, Dad, I'm so sorry. Look at what a beast has done to your favorite son. They must have eaten him, all the while they've sold him into slavery. What is that? That's trickery. The same seed that Jacob sowed was the same harvest that later on in life he reaped. Not only once, but what happened at Laban's house. He goes over there and Rebecca says, go over there for a few days. A few days turns into 20 years. 20 years. There was a portion of that, according to the Bible, it flew by fast. But then there was about 13 years where you see that Jacob is living a miserable life. He goes over there and he's walking in. He goes over there to see his uncle Laban. He goes up to a well. He's getting ready to feed the camels, the livestock or whatever it is. And this servant comes out. He tells him who he is, that he has a relationship with Laban. He says, well, hey, Laban's daughter is about to come out. Her name is Rachel. You can talk to her and then go see Laban. Rachel comes out, and the Bible says that Jacob got off his horse, got off his camel, whatever beast he was upon, got down and hugged her, kissed her, and he wept. That must have been some kiss. The Bible says he wept at seeing Rachel. And so they go to Laban's house. Go to Laban's house, and he makes this deal. He said, look, if I can have Rachel, if you will give her to me so that I can marry, then I will serve you. I'll do whatever you want. And Laban says, I hear you. You'll serve me for 7 years. And for 7 years, it went by just like a twinkling of an eye. Served them for 7 years. And they come to the wedding night. What happens? The wedding night, he goes into the tent, and he finds Leah there, the older sister. And the next day it dawns upon him what's happened. He goes to Laban and says, hey, we made a deal for Rachel, not for Leah. And he goes to her, and Laban says to him, he says, but in our way of doing things, the youngest cannot go before the oldest. What does he do? He tricks them. He tricks Jacob. And at this moment, Jacob begins to look for an exit. He begins to look for a way out. And he flees from Laban. And what do we see that happens with Laban? Turn over to Genesis chapter 31. By this time, Laban has tricked him concerning Rachel. Jacob is forced an exit from Laban, trying to get away from him, but Laban pursues him. And in chapter 31, verse 38, it says this. This 20 years, this is Jacob talking to Laban, he says, this 20 years have I been with thee. Thy ewes and thy she-goats have not cast their young, and the rams of thy flock have I not eaten. I've done you right, in other words, where this arrangement is concerned. Verse 39, that which was torn of beast I brought not unto thee, meaning that I didn't give you the leftovers. Meaning that whatever was torn from the flock, I didn't bring to you and count it against you. I took the weight of that. I took the brunt of that. I brought not unto thee, I bear the loss of it. Of my hand didst thou require it, whether stolen by day or stolen by night. Thus I was in the day the drought consumed me, and the frost by night, and my sleep departed from my eyes. Thus have I been 20 years in thy house. I served thee 14 years for thy 2 daughters, and 6 years for thy cattle, and thou hast changed my wages 10 times. Except the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac had been with me, surely thou hast sent me away now empty. God hath seen my affliction, and the labor of mine hands, and rebuked thee yesternight. Laban comes to him intending to kill Jacob. That's the intent of Laban. The reason is because Laban's other sons are now jealous of the prosperity and the blessings that are on Jacob. And they say, if Laban dies, then Jacob is going to get away with all this. And so they begin to plot against him. And as a result of them plotting against him, Jacob learns of this. He goes to Leah and Rachel and says, we've got to get out of here. So he packs up everything and he goes on. And Laban is mad, thinking that he has stolen stuff, thinking that he has taken things, and he pursues him with his family, intending to kill him. And all the while, back in some other remote place, Esau is over there dealing with his thoughts. Esau is thinking Jacob has got to pay. And Jacob is sitting here thinking, I am never going to have to pay. But look at how miserable Jacob's life was for 20 years. For 20 years. This is why the Bible tells us to pray for our enemies. Why? Because they need it. They need it. But David, you don't know what they did to me. They still need your prayers. And I know that that's hard. That's easier said than done. Once again, forgiveness is hard. If it's not hard, then you haven't been hurt bad enough. But this is why the Bible tells us to pray for our enemies. Because be not deceived, God is not mocked. Whatsoever a man soweth. Well, I've got to pay them back. No, you don't. No, you don't. What happens in your life has nothing to do with what any other seeds somebody has sown into you, but about the seeds that you are about to sow. This is why you pray for your enemies. You can actually come to the place where when you operate in this, that you'll cry over the harvest that your enemy is experiencing because of the seeds that they've sown. Maybe not only towards you, but towards others. You need to pray along these lines. Number 2, the second reason we need to forgive, let things go, take the yoke off, is people are deceived and immature. We need to show mercy because there will be a time in our lives where we'll need mercy. People are deceived, they're immature. We need to show mercy because there will be times in our lives where we need mercy. You know what deception is? Deception is when you believe you're right, but you're actually wrong. And one of the greatest places that can show up is in a marriage. Because you'll sit there and you'll tell everybody, I'm right, I'm right, I'm right, I'm right, when you're really wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. I know I'm right, David. She's wrong. I'm right, she's wrong. You believe that. That's the deception of deception. You actually believe that you're right when you're wrong. I'm right. But yet everybody knows around you, and even inwardly, you know she's right, you're wrong. That's the poison of deception. You believe you're right to the point where you'll tell everybody, you'll believe it when you're actually wrong. This is the same thing that happened to Jesus up on the cross. He's up on the cross, and what does he do? He said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Why? Because you had a priestly leadership. You had a generation that truly believed they were doing the world a favor by killing Jesus, that he was not the Son of God. They were deceived. They believed they were right when they were actually wrong. And God says, Lord, hold it not to their account. Forgive them, for they know not that they're wrong. Jacob was deceived. Jacob was deceived. I'm sure that Jacob did not mean to be so harsh and to crush Esau the way that he did. I truly believe that. Because we'll see some things here in a little bit, but you see that he has an encounter with God, things shift, things turn. But he was deceived into thinking that I've got to have this, I've got to do this, I'm right. My mom's right. My mom said that when we were in the room, we were wrestling even while we were in the room, and Rebecca went to God and said, God, why is there so much wrestling on the inside of me? And God reveals to her that not only are two sons wrestling on the inside of her, that is emblematic or symbolic of two nations that are wrestling with one another. And so Rebecca knows this. And so all of her life, as Jacob and Esau are growing up, she knows that Jacob is going to be the one that Esau has to come under and serve. And so Mama's saying this, Mama's saying that, Mama's saying this, Mama's saying that I'm going to be gay. Mama says that Esau's going to serve me. Mama said. What Mama said is not what God said. And I know that's holy ground. Well, Mama said. Well, God's words may be different than what Mama said. Be not deceived. God is not mocked. For whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. What I'm thankful for is that Jacob didn't stay deceived. He had an encounter with God. And we're about to find out that him and Esau, they grew up. They matured. The third reason that you need to forgive is because hurt will make you bitter or better, but it never leaves you unchanged. Hurt will make you bitter or better, it will never leave you unchanged. Think back to when Jacob deceived Isaac and Esau. Esau wants to kill Jacob. Rebekah hears about this, and he sends Jacob off to Uncle Laban. And the reason that she gave Isaac for sending him off was what? So that he would not have to marry one of the local girls, the Hittites or the Canaanites. Esau hears this and says, oh, you don't want me to marry, you don't want Jacob to marry any Canaanites or Hittites. Watch what I'm about to do, Mom and Dad. I'm going to marry every Canaanite and Hittite that I can possibly find. And he does. He does. But who's he mad at? He's not mad at his dad. Who's he mad at? He's mad at Jacob. But who does he hurt? He hurts his dad. He hurts those ladies because he's not marrying them for love. He's marrying them in spite. Who does he hurt? He hurts his dad. He hurts those ladies, and he hurts himself. He hurts himself. All the while thinking that if I do this, I'll make Jacob pay for what he's done. He hurts himself more than anyone. Because when you harden your heart, you harden your heart. You can't harden your heart towards someone and it be soft to someone else. When you harden your heart, you harden your heart. If you're holding unforgiveness towards someone, it's not hurting them, it's hurting you. It's hurting your relationships. It's hurting the reconciliation that God can bring into your life. Now we get to the end of the story, and we see that Jacob and Esau, they finally get it. It can either leave you bitter or better. Hurt can either leave you bitter or better, but it doesn't leave you unchanged. In the beginning, that hurt left Esau bitter to the point where he hurt his dad, those ladies, and himself. But finally, Jacob and Esau, they get it. Jacob finally wants peace. He wants peace more than he wants the birthright. He wants peace more than he wants the blessing. He wants peace than he wants the natural stuff. That is a sign of maturity. That is a sign of growth. Esau and Jacob didn't know that the other had an encounter with God. All this while, Esau is thinking, I've got to make Jacob pay. And Jacob is thinking, I can't go back to Esau because he's mad at me. If I go back to him, then he's going to kill me. And yet they never realized that Esau had his own encounter with God and that Jacob had his own encounter with God. Your enemy, the one who has wronged you, whether it be for 20 years, last week, yesterday, all your life, your enemy can have an encounter with God and it can turn that situation. You have to believe that. That the one who has done you wrong, they can have an encounter with God. And so Jacob flees Laban. He takes everything. Laban catches up with him. They part peacefully at that point. And he says, Laban, I'm going back to Esau. I'm going back home. And so he sends word back home that Jacob is coming back home. Esau hears of this. And his servants bring back word that Esau is on his way to meet you with 400 other servants. In the back of his mind, Jacob is thinking, he's coming to kill me. But I'd rather be killed by Esau than go back to the misery that I was experiencing with Laban. So he divides everything up to do his best to try to safeguard his family. Esau catches up with him. And in this moment, we find something, well, I'll put it this, the night before, because I want to make this point. The night before Jacob and Esau meet, Jacob has this encounter with God. Him and Jesus wrestle. They're there wrestling, and Jesus says, let me go. And Jacob says, I will not let you go. Jesus says once again, let me go. And Jacob says, I will not let you go. Jesus one more time says, let me go. And Jacob says, I will not let you go until you bless me. And Jesus says, okay, I'll bless you. What does he do? Jesus comes to him and says, for all your life, you've been known as Jacob. You've been known as a heel. You've been known as a manipulator. You've been known as a trickster. You've been known as someone who tries to circumvent the right way of doing things. You've been known as Jacob. Today, I'm going to change your name to Israel. For with God and man, I am making you a prince. He changed the man's name. He changed his name. An encounter with God turned a trickster into a prince. You understand that the children of Israel are not named after a location. The children of Israel are named after a person. They're not named after a geographical location. They are named after a trickster. Israel is. All because Jacob had an encounter with God. And in that moment, he changed his name from Jacob to Israel. And from that, the nation of Israel is as we know it today. All because Jacob had an encounter with God and changed his name. In Genesis chapter 33, I'll end with this scripture. Esau finally catches up to Jacob. And I want you to notice the change in Esau. Verse 3. And he passed over before them. This is Jacob. And Jacob passed over before them and bowed himself to the ground 7 times until he came near to Esau. Do you see the humility? Do you see the humility in Jacob? He's had an encounter with God. Pride makes excuses. Humility makes adjustments. And he comes in and he humbles himself before Esau. And he lifted up his eyes, verse 4. And Esau ran to meet him and embraced him and fell on his neck and kissed him, and they wept. That's different than the last time he saw Esau, isn't it? Esau wanted to kill him last time. Those were the words that Jacob had heard were spoken over him, that if I go back to Esau, he's going to kill me. And yet now, because of an encounter with God, they embrace, they kiss, they weep with one another. And he lifted up his eyes and saw the women and the children and said, who are those with thee? And he said, the children which God hath graciously given thy servant. Then the handmaiden came near, they and their children, and bowed themselves. And Leah also with her children came near and bowed themselves. And after came Joseph near and Rachel, and they bowed themselves. And he said, what meanest thou by all this drove which I met? And he said, these are to find grace in the sight of my Lord. And Esau said, I have enough, my brother. Keep thou hast unto thyself. Notice Jacob is here. He's willing to give him everything back. He's willing to give him the birthright, the blessing. He's saying, all of this is for you, Esau. Esau comes to him and says, what are you doing? What is all this for? And he says, it's for you. It's for you. I'd rather be at your mercy than live the way that I previously lived. I'd rather be at your mercy. I'd rather humble myself to you, Esau, knowing that I did you wrong, than have to go back and live with Laban. And Esau looks at him and says, Jacob, I have enough. I have enough. And Jacob said, nay, I pray thee, if I have found grace in thy sight, then receive my present at my hand. For therefore I have seen thy face as though I had seen the face of God, and thou wast pleased with me. When you're changed, you don't see the face of people anymore. You see the face of God. That's what an encounter with God can do. That's the power of it. Somebody who's wronged you, you've wronged them. You have an encounter with God. Your enemy has an encounter with God. The next time that you see them, it can be the potential for where you don't see them, you see God in them. And isn't that what it's all about? Seeing God in others. Why? Because of eternity and the eternal decisions that are being made. Verse 11, take, I pray thee, my blessing that is brought to thee, because God hath dealt graciously with me, and because I have enough. And he urged him, and he took it. Do you see the change in Esau? Do you see the change in Jacob? So the last thing, number 4, is this. God is great enough to bless you in the face of loss, hurt, and pain. God is great enough to bless you in the face of loss, hurt, and pain. God is great enough to bless you in the face of loss, hurt, and pain. God is great enough to bless you in the face of loss, hurt, and pain. God is great enough to bless you in the face of loss, hurt, and pain. God is great enough to bless you in the face of loss, hurt, and pain. God is great enough to bless you in the face of loss, hurt, and pain. God is great enough to bless you in the face of loss, hurt, and pain. God is great enough to bless you in the face of loss, hurt, and pain. God is great enough to bless you in the face of loss, hurt, and pain. God is great enough to bless you in the face of loss, hurt, and pain. God is great enough to bless you in the face of loss, hurt, and pain. God is great enough to bless you in the face of loss, hurt, and pain. God is great enough to bless you in the face of loss, hurt, and pain. God is great enough to bless you in the face of loss, hurt, and pain. God is gre God is great enough to bless you in the face of loss, hurt, and pain. Do you see the beauty of this story? I mean, it truly is. I asked in the beginning, do you have any family issues? But do you see the beauty of this story? There were two brothers who were wrestling since birth. They were wrestling for one another for years. One of them hurt the other one so bad that they separated. One of them wanted to kill the other one. The other one had to get away from him because he knew he was about to be killed. And for 20 years, these men were separated. They were never in the presence of one another. For 20 years, this wound, this hurt, this offense was prevalent in their life. But God did a work in both of them. God blessed both of them in spite of the hurt and the offense. Think about it. Esau was without the birthright and the blessing, but yet his encounter with God showed him that God loved him so much that God would forgive him for giving away his birthright and restore to him the very blessing that Jacob had stolen from him. And on the flip side of that, Jacob, the one who had the blessing and the birthright, all he wants is peace. And he meets a God that gives him that peace and says, no longer will you be called a herder or Jacob, you'll only be called Israel from now on. Jacob, the herder, the manipulator, becomes a prince. Esau, the one who had been hurt, finally gets dominion over the yoke of heaviness that was upon his life. That's the reason that you and I need to take that yoke off. I don't care if you're wearing it like a necklace. Take that yoke off, let it go, and let God work in your life.